And we are back with another outstanding episode of Square Table Degenerates. Today we welcome to the show Libertarian Candidate for President, Mr. Chase Oliver. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing fantastic. Just getting ready for the Libertarian Party of Georgia convention starting tomorrow. So been enjoying myself.
Okay, then do you get like a green room with all kinds of edibles there and stuff like that? Or what's the Libertarian convention like? Is it just like, is it more than four guys just sitting there at a Sunoco? What's the deal here?
Oh yeah, a room full of edibles does sound quite opposed the drug war, of course. But no, actually, our convention is where we do our party business. So we'll have folks coming from all over the state coming to hang out for Georgia. Yeah, typically we do the business on Sunday, and we have great speakers and a presidential candidate debate on Saturday that I'll be taking part in. And it's my home state, so I got a bias, but I really like the Georgia Libertarians, of course.
Okay, good deal, man. Good deal. Now, the internet tells me you were born, and this is an interesting fact. I don't know if you ever knew this, but you were born on the exact date Sean Penn and Madonna were married.
Like the exact I did not know that.
Yeah, isn't that wild?
It's also Madonna's birthday, August the 16th.
Oh,
got married on her birthday.
Wow, that's convenient, actually.
Yeah, it's hard to forget your anniversary when it's also your birthday. Also, you get twice as many gifts from your partner.
Right. Well, it's like, dude, I don't ever remember. My anniversary is February 21st. I always remember it just because, I intentionally put it like the week after Valentine's Day, so I'll like kind of remember it. For some reason, I remember things in like 7-day sequences. Like one friend, Erica, I always remember her birthday, September 18th, because it's the week after September 11th. I don't know why I make that correlation, but it just, because like, I'm not trying to make it in June, because I'm not trying to, what if it's hot? You know what I mean? That's a really bad wedding anniversary party, bro. If everything's hot like that, I'm not trying to do all that.
Things to think about when I eventually get married one day.
I do like to double it up with the birthday. That's actually a good idea. A lot of women are gonna go for their guys. Whoever ain't gonna go for that shit though. Yeah. Let's see. Bear with me here. All right. Yeah. So the exact day Sean Penn married. Sorry about that. Oh, and it says you worked in restaurants for a couple decades and then got into politics. So starting out, what did your parents, caregivers do? What did they do for a living when you was growing up?
Yeah. So my dad's always been like a salesman of one kind or another for meter equipment to offices, but he's always been a salesman. And my mom, she worked usually either in an office as like an accountant, reception, that kind of stuff, or was a stay-at-home mom for a lot of my life. And as you mentioned, restaurants, man, my first real job was restaurant, and then I worked my way up to becoming a line cook, a server, a manager, and so I've kind of worked every kind of facet of the restaurant industry, which is a very, very high stress industry. If you've ever seen the show The Bear, that's a great like representation of what goes on in a kitchen. And so it was an industry that certainly prepared me for the rough and tumble world. If I can handle 5, 6 tops at one time, I can handle, the world of politics,
Now, did you, in high school, were you in like any clubs, any sports you got into? What was your high school career like?
Oh, I was kind of the band nerd, man. So first I was out. I came out in high school, so that was kind of the thing. 20 years ago, there weren't that many LGBTQ students. Something I was kind of known for. But then I also just fell in with the band geeks, in particular, kind of the more punk rocky band geeks. I was in the drum line. And so from an early age, I liked smashing things and making loud noises. So drumline was like perfect for me. And that's where I kind of found my tribe, dude, is, sports were not really every football game because I was part of the marching band. So that was nice. But yeah, I was just a band nerd.
Okay. I started out like kind of footballish because I'm big, I'm like 6 something. And, I'm not fat, but, I was lineman size back then. It's like, but I'm lazy, dude. I'm really lazy. And I founded beer, back in high school. Back then you couldn't really smoke weed because it was legal. But man, I just really got in with beers. That's what really took off, man. I really found my niche with just getting loaded. And as you know, that's the kind of stuff's not productive, And then I joined the Air Garden, and that kind of is like adding gasoline to that fire there. But did you have any rest? Did you work at the same place, like a mom and pop spot? Did you work at chain spots? Any places you remember?
Oh yeah, man.
Any fond stories of them?
Yeah, so for you worked at like a local pizzeria in my town, like the town I grew up in. But then I popped around all kinds of like I said, the local pizzeria to like really fine dining establishments. You know, I kind of enjoyed working through that industry, but really it gave me like appreciation for service, right? Like if you don't provide the service as a server, right, you don't get paid, you don't get your tips. And so it really taught me how to like sell an idea, aka a product, something that's very important. It also just taught me that, you know, if you're not providing, if you're not giving a return on an investment for people, they're not likely to pay you. And so it served me really well, kind of transitioning, because I transitioned from there into the corporate world of logistics, helping to move products from one side of the world to the other. You know, it kind of helped me transition from that blue collar world to the white collar world.
Okay. Now, was logistics after? Did you like after you got out of high school? Did you go into college? Did you go to do any service? What was your before? I mean, the kind of interim. Well, like, what'd you do to get yourself to where you are in terms of like after high school?
Oh yeah, really? I just jumped right into the workforce. That's what got me started in restaurants. I needed a job, man. I had to pay money. Like I had to live. And I did not, you know, I had a little bit of online college, but that didn't really play out. And so I just got started working. And then from there, you know, after a long time in that industry, into logistics, which is, you know, it was a very rewarding career. It taught me so much about like how interconnected the world is to our markets. I worked with people both from all over the world. We had people from like many nations represented. And so it was kind of a learn on the job kind of experience, you know. That's how I've always kind of been, is just jump right into something head first. And it doesn't mean that I don't think college is great. I'm actually really happy that my oldest niece is going to college, and you know, we have lots of smart folks out there, but not all of them have gone to college. That just jump right in the workforce, either through necessity or that's just what they wanted to do. They maybe just was like, hey man, I just want to jump right into being a plumber, and I'll own my own plumbing business in 5 years, and I can retire by age 50. You know, that's a reality for a lot of people, and it's an untold story for a lot of folks. You know, we always, you know, the government in particular, elected officials, they always push college on kids. Where I really think sometimes we need to talk more about trade schools, apprenticeships, and things where people can really make a really great living. There's lots of service industry. You know, it's not the most glamorous job in the world, but let me tell you right now, if you know how to get an air conditioner going in the South, you're going to be very, very popular. If you know how to keep heating going up in the Northeast, you're always going to have a job every winter. So those are industries that people can get into and make a great living in, raise a family, and glamorize the way a college education is.
That's funny you mentioned HVAC. It reminds me back in '97. I went to school for that for a while, but then I ended up getting a DUI. Nobody would hire me, so it was kind of a waste of a year, but it was still all right thing. I learned then that I wasn't going to work with my hands, Chase. I wasn't going to. I didn't like working with my hands. I liked the office work. It took me a while to get there, but I eventually got there. But yeah, I'm going to jump the gun on something I wasn't going to talk about really, but like the trades are good for people, but that brings to the issue healthcare. Now, like from a libertarian perspective, from your perspective, where do you think the nation should go towards healthcare? I mean, I would get rid of insurance companies, and I think it would kind of work itself out and have some kind of baseline. My idea would be like a baseline, like compared to the mail. You get the postal service, you can mail stuff at a base rate for everything. And if you want extra stuff, you can go to FedEx, UPS, whatever. You know what I mean? I think that's the way healthcare should be. You could go to, you know, the regular USPS doctor for, you know, regular ailments, and if you want especially treatment or et cetera, I mean, that would take a lot of, you know, selling and stuff. But what's your take on the libertarian perspective and your personal perspective on where healthcare is now with trades and healthcare in general and where it's going to go?
So we libertarians, we of course encourage opposed to government solutions as a party that's principles is rooted in a limited government, both size and you know, it's funny that you mentioned like getting rid of insurance companies. I don't want to get rid of all insurance companies. In fact, I think we can deregulate the market to where we can have more competition amongst insurance companies that would lower their prices and premiums. But even more so, we need to kind of change the way we think about healthcare. So I'm a big advocate of what's called direct primary care healthcare, where you pay out of pocket a month, you know, to a doctor's office. They don't take insurance. Actually, they don't take traditional insurance. You pay for an individual under $100 a month. And with that, you get access to that doctor's office anytime you need. You don't even have to visit each time. Sometimes you can just do it through telehealth or through email saying, hey, doc, my prescription's up. Can you send me another prescription via email? Or a quick Google Voice call so we can have a quick telemedicine visit. And it works out so great. And basically what they do is instead of paying, huge amounts of overhead to insurance coding and billing, they just provide all of that directly as a service to you. It's a much better outcome for a comparable price to paying for our premiums for an Obamacare plan that has like a $10,000 or $12,000 deductible that the average working stiff is never going to reach that deductible anyway. And so why not just invest in a DPC healthcare system? And then you do have insurance for like catastrophic stuff. Like if you get hit by a bus, or you come down, or you have cancer or some major ailment that requires like chronic care for the rest of your life or life-saving care. Think about it like your car insurance. Car insurance is when you get into a wreck, right? It's not when you need to put gas in the car or throw some tires in the car. Those are day-to-day costs. A free market like this, it would actually lower the costs over time. And speaking with a DPC doctor and DPC patients, they are much happier than those who have to go through HMOs or insurance companies because, they spend 5 minutes per half hour with the doctor, whereas if you go to a traditional doctor's office, you're lucky to get 5 minutes in there with a doctor, and the rest is with people who are asking to fill out paperwork. And I think this is a much better way to provide healthcare and to actually lower the costs over time through market forces. Instead of trying, I'm sure that's well-meaning, and people really think, hey, that's a great idea. Let the government provide all the healthcare. But when that happens, you do get shortages. You're going to get market gaps that people fall through. I have a friend who in Canada, they waited 6 months to get a scan for cancer. And by that point, the tumor had spread a lot more than it would have if they had been able to go in there immediately. They had to wait in line. And that's actually a way a lot of people die in those systems, unfortunately.
Yeah. The model for the free market stuff, I mean, there's not a lot of it, but like, if you think of elective surgeries, for example, like the eye surgery, the LASIK and the lap band stuff, the price of that, if you look at it since it started in the 90s, has dropped a lot. I mean, I don't know exactly the numbers, but if you look at the numbers, I guarantee you LASIK right now is cheaper than it was in 1998 or whatever, so the prices do drop.
Absolutely. And you can look at drug prices too. Like if you want to look at an awesome example of that, look at Mark Cuban's cost plus drug pharmacy. So what he does is he takes the base rate plus 15%. He never goes above that. And because of that, there are generic drugs in the market that you can get without any insurance through there for much cheaper than you would even get with good insurance. And we can do this by continuing to get rid of patent evergreening and other tools that drug companies use to keep a hold on their drugs. Once those generics hit the marketplace, it's very easy for people like Mark Cuban to provide a much reduced rate for the cost of drugs. And so that combined with DPC healthcare can actually lower the cost of the average individual or average family's rate for what they pay in healthcare per year. A catastrophic insurance policy, of course, to cover if the worst should occur, which if you're practicing preventive healthcare, you're able to go see your rate so you can know you're not, cutting pills in half to make it stretch out because you're having to afford things. Well, that can lead to better health outcomes where you're not needing to go through the catastrophic stuff. And you're actually living longer and living healthier and living happier. That's a great outcome, I think. And there's a talk about right now because it's just yip from the left and yap from the right, and nobody really wants to get anything done.
Amen. All right, we got a question from Captain. He's getting right into it, and he probably knows the answer to something like this. I mean, it's just based on perspective, but he says he's actually in Northern Ireland, so this is kind of funny. He's really into American politics, and we talk a lot about it on Twitter, so it's kind of funny. He says, "Is voting Libertarian a wasted vote in a two-party system?"
Why? Because if we're ever going to break down the two-party system, we have to support alternatives. We have to start a movement that is outside of the two-party system box. And I know you might not win this election, but you're helping to build up, for the next election and for helping elect local libertarians and helping elect down ballot folks. And this is actually something we need to talk about. They call us spoilers in a two-party system, and it's because of the way we vote. We have plurality voting. Most votes. So we have a lot of people in Congress right now who are elected with under 50% of the vote. They're not even representing the majority. And so we need to fix this with things like ranked choice voting. So that way we remove the so-called spoiler effect, right? Because they call libertarians and other third parties spoiler candidates. But we're not spoilers. We're just candidates who are participating, and we have voters who are sharing their vote and sharing their voice. The reason why our votes get spoiled is the people in power only providing us with plurality voting as opposed to ranked choice. And others, we're not spoiling and we're not wasting a vote. We're not spoiling an election. They are spoiling the election. And the only way to change that is to demand a different way to vote, ranked choice voting. And so I encourage people, everybody, I don't care whether you're left, right, or center, vote outside of the Republicans and Democrats. They have not earned your. They've continued to spend more than they've taken in. They've continued to send us to wars around the world. They've never addressed the major issues like immigration or criminal justice reform or anything. And they've continued to use and abuse your vote. Never a wasted vote to protest against a system that is corrupt. And we all know the two-party system is corrupt.
This is a good question. And I'll follow up with my question I was going to ask you on the topic. He says, what is the libertarian stance on law and order? How to prevent a Wild West? I'll piggyback on that with just asking the obvious, gun question. Let me find it here. Jesus Christ, where was it? Oh, here we go. Like I said, most libertarians are gun nuts. I love guns. Don't get me wrong. It says right there in the document, shall not be infringed. But I'm not like an enthusiast. You know what I mean? I have a gun, but like it's not the end of the world if I don't know where my gun's at every second of the day. I'm not a gun collector, et cetera, et cetera. Like, do you, where are you on the gun spectrum, so to speak? And to go back to Captain's question, what do you think? What are libertarians? Obviously, libertarians are very pro-gun, but what is your personal opinion on stuff like that? And what is the question for that? I mean, usually libertarianism is a thing for minimalism, and is that just more law enforcement, or is it just kind of like, is the equivalency like, say, when I was in Iraq, everybody had a full-on gun, nothing ever happened. But the
first off, let me just I'll answer the first question and then go backwards from there. So law and order, absolutely, we support law and order, and by that I mean, I'm a minarchist, so I believe actually one of the actual functions of government with one another when one's liberty is being threatened or infringed upon another person. That's a legitimate use of government. If one person is infringing upon the liberty of another, it is a legitimate use of government to prevent that infringement. That's where law and order comes in. What libertarians oppose is when laws are used to try to control, compel, coerce people's behavior when they're just being peaceful. This is why we oppose the drug war. This is why we believe that consensual sex work should be legal, because, it's still funny that is illegal, but if you put it on camera, all of a sudden it's entertainment and it's okay for people to watch. But across the spectrum, if you're not harming anybody, you're not committing force, fraud, coercion, or theft, it shouldn't be a crime for you to act in whatever way you want to on your property or with your body. It's when your behavior liberty that law and order should come in. Now, as for preventing a wild, wild west, I do believe that there is a need for arresting those who are violent, arresting those who commit force, fraud, theft, or coercion, and imprisoning them. Like, I think we sometimes, with mandatory minimums, the death penalty, and other things, we do wrong by the justice system, but it doesn't mean that there's not a need for a justice system. Now, to gun rights, I absolutely support the right to own a gun, to defend yourself. I don't really support most restrictions on people owning them. I just think as long as you're peaceful, as long as you're being peaceful, I think most gun laws actually affect law-abiding gun owners, because if you're a criminal with a gun, you're not going to see a gun control law and go, oh, well, you know what? I'm going to give up my gun now. No, only law-abiding people give up their guns when guns are made illegal in this country. And as you said, it's very clear, shall not be infringed. And as you said, I'm heading out to a gun range event in the morning with Spike Cohen to go shoot some guns. And I borrowed an AK-47 from Joe Jorgensen, who ran for president in 2020. I'm actually kind of hyped to get to shoot that, because I've never fired that kind of gun before. So that my 38 special will be being used tomorrow morning on the gun range by peaceful people who just seek to target shoot and enjoy their enthusiasm of firearms. So it'll be a good fundraiser. Always a good chance to meet Spike. You said you've interviewed Spike in the past. He's a really nice guy.
Oh yeah.
So, I believe guns aren't really the issue. I tell people all the time, my mom, when she was in high school, they had a target shooting club. school with a bagged rifle on their shoulder, put it in their locker, and then after school, take it out of the locker, go to the football field and target shoot. And nobody shot at each other. There was never a rifles or so loaded in the school at any one time, but yet nobody shot each other. So it tells me that the X factor is something beyond just guns. A lot of it has to do with dehumanizing one another. The rise of social media has made that so easy. It's so easy to go behind a cartoon avatar picture and dehumanize people. Probably get smacked across the face by somebody, but people feel free to do that now, and it creates, particularly for young men who feel lonely, a kind of a psychological black hole that they can fall into, and that's a phenomenon we need to observe. But you don't need to stop peaceful people from exercising. But anyway, your question, right. Captain Baptane.
All right, now what is your take? I just randomly thought of this while we were talking here. You froze up there for like half a second, but what is your bottom line on, like, because like in my opinion, just because somebody had a certain charge, well, it be a felony in some states or whatever, they still should have some right to protect their family, protect their property, etc. But I mean, obviously, we don't want people being convicted of murder, doing that. But I mean, if they were that dangerous to begin with, wouldn't they already be locked up, kind of thing? So like, where is the line, kind of in the sand with past criminal activity and just the ability to own a gun? Because I mean, if you think back to the days of colonial era, there wasn't really a court system. Everybody could have a gun no matter what happened in life through eternity, pretty much. You know what I mean? So what's your take on that?
So I believe, for felons, once you've done your time and you've gone through your post-release, you should have a restitution of rights. That includes voting rights, and that certainly includes your right to protect yourself with a gun. And I do believe, like you said, if someone's so violent that they've committed like first-degree murder, I do believe in life sentences for prison, right? Like they should be separated from society for good. Killed somebody with premeditation to do violence, and as you said, if somebody is free enough to be able to come back on the streets, they should be free enough to defend themselves from attack. And certainly if they have served their time, served their parole or probation, they should be able to re-enter society. The whole purpose of our justice system is supposed to be restorative. It's back sometimes what they've taken through a prison sentence. But what you can do is try to reform and restore people to being capable of being in society without committing harms against other people. And so part of that trust and saying that, hey, you've done your time, you've not committed other crimes, you've not committed other wrong, live as free as anybody else and have a restoration of rights.
Amen. All right, we got a question from Angie. It says, is there any way of battling the fentanyl epidemic, which is normally started through a prescription from a medical doctor? What is your stance on this? I mean, you made it clear in the past you want to obviously end the war on drugs, but yeah. I mean, the obvious addiction issues in some cities and in some communities are quite there. I mean, it's a lot of it is coming from China, in my opinion. I mean, if you had a government lab that tested all this stuff and did it, you wouldn't have the fentanyl stuff, but then you have the underlying issues with, cocaine and stuff like that. So obviously, as a libertarian, you do want to end the war on drugs, but where would you take it from there? Like, what would be your first act as president to I mean, besides like, directly killing an agency, some kind of nuclear option, what would your outreach options be, or what would you do to end the war on drugs? Or
yeah, so if we want to look at like a real world example of what I think the Portugal. So Portugal had, just a little history lesson for folks. In the 90s, Portugal had they had the worst heroin epidemic in the continent of Europe. They had the highest IV drug use. Because of this, they had the highest HIV rate. And in the early 2000s, they decided, instead of going on like a heavy war on drugs model, like what the United States have been doing, they decided to go a decriminalization route. They decriminalized. They did is they allowed for avenues for addiction therapy. So if you were, say, caught using in the street, instead of arresting you, what they would do is they would say, hey, here is an appointment to go talk to a drug counselor to say, hey, here's what options you can do. Also, the ability to provide, safe use kits. And with this, also, you mentioned testing labs. you could go to a pharmacist with your product and say, can you please test this to test the purity of it? With this, they prevented, they now have the lowest overdose rate in Europe. They cut the hepatitis and HIV rates way, way, way down. And they on the continent. Now, this is because they changed the way they think about drug use and drug addiction as from being a criminal justice problem to a health problem. Now, the way we can battle this fentanyl epidemic is to decriminalize drugs, to destigmatize addiction first and foremost, so those who need help can get it. And then also supporting direct action in our communities. I always, every time we talk about this, I shout out a group called Shred the Stigma Oklahoma. They do amazing work. Free fentanyl testing strips to users, clean needles. And the reason why they do this is not because they want people to keep using drugs. Those people are going to keep using the drugs whether they want them to or not. But what you're doing is you're providing ways to prevent them from overdosing, testing the drugs ahead of time, and using clean disease, and creating trust with that community. So when people do want to get clean, they can go, you know what? Those people from Shred the Stigma, they've been keeping me clean, or they've been giving me clean needles. They've been giving me, it saved my friend from overdose. They've saved over 700 lives from overdose alone, just this one organization. And they'll go, you know what? I need to get clean. Those are the people I'm going to call to help me. And they have a lifeline now. We just have to have a little bit more empathy from those suffering from addiction. That's the other thing is we often look down, we from addiction. It's a real epidemic in this country. So many people now know somebody who's suffering from addiction. So hopefully those attitudes are changing. But as a presidential candidate, while I want to end the war on drugs, it's because it's not that I just want everybody to like go out and get high on cocaine and heroin. People who want to do that are already doing that. I don't want to create an illegal black market around it that creates so much violence and despair. I would rather create an suffering to be able to go get help for their suffering, as opposed to suffering in silence and shame, because that's what we do to so many addicts right now. We allow them to suffer in the darkness and shame and never get the help they want, because they feel like even if they reach out for help, they're going to be judged, they're going to be treated poorly, and instead suffering and having a lot worse outcomes in life than we could really be seeing if we just changed our attitudes towards addiction, and our policy of locking people up and throwing away the key. Those just aren't working anymore in this country, and anybody can see it. The only people who don't see it are the people who are in power and government, who are bought and paid for by the prison industrial complex, the pharmaceutical, and others who don't want to end the war on drugs, because it either pharmaceutical companies or removes the beds they're filling up in case of the prison industrial complex. And they need those beds filled to keep their profits rolling. And we shouldn't have profit on human misery like prison.
You stole the next question right out of my mouth, Chase. I was literally going to mention the prison industrial complex. Well done, sir. Well done. Captain has another question. And I'll preface my answer with this. He says, doesn't the libertarian vote just split the conservative vote? I wouldn't say no. I wouldn't say so, because a lot of it's freedom issues. I mean, we got to be real about the Libertarian Party. A lot of it is heavily, veteran, white male kind of thing. But I mean, there is, in my opinion, just the freedom aspect of it. It's just leave me alone. If I want to do something, I want to do it. And when people realize that part of it, I think it can appeal to both sides. What's your take on that?
Yeah. So, I ran for U.S. Senate in 2022, and we did get exit poll data from that when I forced the runoff between Herschel Walker and Raphael Warnock. What it showed is we had a pretty even split between people who identified as Republicans and Democrats. We didn't really get a ton of their votes regardless. What we got mostly was people who classify themselves as independent. Now, when you look at those independents, they asked, who would you vote for if Chase weren't there? Like who would, and it was about, somewhere around like 20 for the Democrat, like 28, 29%, something like that. So they would have voted for the Republican. And then the lion's share said they would have just stayed at home and wouldn't have voted because they didn't like either of the choices. And so really, I think we actually can dig into both the conservative slash progressive voter base, but really where the money is getting in with those independent. More people in this country identify as independent. I think it's now over half the country does not officially identify as a Republican or a Democrat. They identify either with a third party or as an independent. And that's only good for a libertarian like myself or anybody outside the two-party structure, because more and more people walk away I hope we're taking, and also here's the truth. If conservatives want libertarian votes, pass libertarian politics. If you want our votes, steal our ideas. Like, that's how you beat us. Please beat us that way. Please, Democrats and Republicans, steal all of our good ideas and loot and beat us in all of our elections and create a libertarian country without electing one libertarian. Oh, darn, we've lost. No, we actually won. And so I hope we hurt them enough to where they adopt our votes or fall into the dustbin of history and get replaced by us.
100% on the just steal the ideas. I mean, I don't know. We'll jump the gun on a couple questions here because we'll get into the weed stuff because everybody knows I like the weed. It's like if the GOP would just be like, yo, we like weed now. It's just like beer. Deal with it. Man, they would get so many votes. You'd have a freaking Republican wave, dude. Simple stuff like that. But no, they want to. I mean, the stuff. I'm going to go off on a tangent here. We got this governor in the state, Chase. His name's Mike DeWine. This guy posts the stupidest shit on Twitter about weed. It's stuff that even if you said out loud, it wouldn't make no sense. It makes no sense whatsoever. It's just completely lying, and it irritates me to no end. No end. And that's why I stay kind of, semi-involved with the libertarians. Hopefully one day I'd love to run as libertarian for Ohio governor. That's why I have a bunch of you guys up. I had on, Spike, and I had on the guy from Athens, Ohio. Fuck, what's his name? He's on my Facebook list. I can't remember at the time, but real nice guy. And we just, just simple stuff. Just take it, and it just irritates me, the stuff he says, man. And it's just so.
Well, what's great about Ohio is y'all had a voter referendum on cannabis, which succeeded very greatly. Like, you guys really killed it out there. Also defended a woman's right to choose as well. And so I want to say is, even if you have a jackass for a governor, right? You the people can, referendum voting, actually maintain some level of sanity up there in Ohio. It's something we've been dealing with. Cancel the contract for Cop City down here, facility that's going to militarize the Atlanta police. And we got 105,000 people to sign a referendum against it. And the city is dragging its feet what they're trying to do is they're trying to build the facility as quickly as possible and putting that referendum on the ballot, hoping that they get enough built where people go, oh, well, they've already built too much for us to stop it. And, we're not going to be quiet about it. So I love the power of citizen referendum to really set things right, even when you have kind of jackasses in charge. And so, yeah, Mike DeWine is certainly is one. I disagree with most. There's a recent thing that he did that got overridden by the legislature, unfortunately, that got undone. I wish that veto had held, but that's about the only thing that I can agree with him on. Everything else, he's been kind of terrible. So find a good libertarian to run for governor of Ohio, if it's you or anybody else, and let's support them, because God knows you can't do any worse. Well, never mind. You can't. There's certainly worse governors. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I'm not going to sit here and act like
mine. And then there's of course the governor of Alabama. She's crazy. And then Sarah Sanders, Arkansas. There's lots of bad governors in the country.
The one that really pisses me off, I think it's either North or South Dakota. Kristi Noem, I think it's South Dakota. She's just such an idiot, dude. That's the thing about the Republicans, man, is that they put in all these random figureheads. They'll get a black guy occasionally. They'll get a girl occasionally. They'll just throw them in there and they'll get defeated or get smoked or whatever, just so they could, say they did whatever with diversity, and they're doing nothing. This Kristi Noem is just a moron. But
I don't want to scare you or anything, but she's who I got money on for being Trump's running mate. I'm betting that's who he picks to be his running mate.
Oh, geez, man. I hope he goes.
I could be wrong, right? I never called Mike Pence, so maybe I'm wrong with this thing. But I'm for some reason, and she's really going to deliver those 3 electoral votes from South Dakota. So.
Modern day Sarah Palin, right, bro?
Yeah, well, I have her to be his running mate. I feel like, of course, Kamala will be Joe Biden's running mate, and I think RFK is going to pick Tulsi Gabbard. If I were to be a betting man, let's see how well I am at betting this thing out. If it happens, you heard it here first. People can know that I was a psychic, and a la Back to the Future, who knew all the answers. But no, anyway, sorry.
Interesting. No problem. That's interesting. Now, I was going to ask you about RFK later. They said, we'll just bring him on the house since you touched on him. Now, I mean, he is, I saw he's eligible in a couple states. I don't know how many states he's eligible in yet, but do you think he's going to jump on the Libertarian Party at all, or no? What's your take on that? Well, one, have you met the guy at all? Have you ever met RFK Jr.? Or no?
I have not. I went to an event called Pork Fest in New Hampshire last year. It's a giant small L libertarian gathering in the middle of the woods in New Hampshire. And he was speaking there, but he had left by the time I actually arrived there later that weekend. So, yep. But here's what I would say about RFK, folks. If you're looking for somebody to challenge the political establishment, someone with the last name Kennedy just doesn't ring as like anti-establishment to me. That sounds like political dynasty to me. Sounds like somebody who's been highly connected with very elite people their entire lives, like every Kennedy ever has been. And if you want somebody who's anti-establishment, vote for somebody who's never been part of the political establishment. Again, someone with the last name Kennedy, that's not them. If your dad ran for president, your uncle was president, your other uncle was a senator for a million years, you're kind of connected. Oh, and you also have a cousin who was in like Congress, and your wife was a member of the CIA, and like there's a lot of connections to the political establishment that just rings to me as like a little. Also, I just find a lot of his solutions to be really terrible. He's said things in the past like the Koch brothers. Oh, well, they don't support policies that I support, so they should be thrown in jail for treason. He literally said that like less than, about 10 years ago. So, I just don't. So, I'm somebody who believes you should make your own decisions about vaccines. You should make your own decisions about healthcare. But for a guy who rails against vaccines so much, the dude is sure happy to put human growth hormone into his body, because he was not that ripped 15 years ago. If you look at pictures of him from way back in the day, he was a beanpole like me. And now all of a sudden he's looking like he could be an extra in the WWE. Natural, folks. That's Barry Bonds level change in your body. So,
all right, we got a question from Captain. I'm not intimately familiar with this guy. I was Googling him while Captain asked the question. I guess he's an author. Says he's Ukrainian American anarchist. You might be familiar with him. It says, would you support Michael? Well, if he's Ukrainian American, he probably wasn't born here. So probably couldn't run.
But I'll be honest, I haven't really read or heard enough of that person to be able to give you an educated guess. If they're broadly libertarian, I suppose, but I don't really know. I can't really say one way or the other. There's a lot, and I think they're a podcaster. And forgive me, I have not listened to every libertarian podcast out there. There are way too many of them, for any one person to listen to all of them. So I have to too much with Michael Malice, other than the fact that I know they're kind of a provocateur. They kind of like to shock things with their, shock folks with their rhetoric. One way or the other, I'm sure our paths will cross at some point. Welcome to get to know them, and I'll make a more educated decision there. The only person I'm endorsing for the Libertarian candidate for president right now is myself, and we have 5 other candidates who are running against me right now. So if it's not me, it's probably going to be one of them. People are already working hard on the campaign trail and putting in the miles, and so I want it to be me. But if it's not me, it's probably going to be this who's already working really hard.
Now, can you say two things? Could you say that name again? And what is your? I've heard rumors of the Libertarians are going to throw a candidate out this year. One, is that true? And 2, what was the name again?
Michael Malice was the one they asked me about.
What was the name? The name you said who wasn't going to win if you didn't win.
Oh, well, we have 5 other candidates. So there's myself. There is Mike Tremont, who is an economist out of Virginia. An ex-cop in Florida for a while. There is Lars Mapstead. He made his money online and making a website, selling it for lots of money out in California. He's a really nice guy as well. There is Jacob Hornberger, who ran for president in 2020. He has written a ton of stuff about libertarianism and stuff. He's a very nice man. I'm going to say they're all nice because I'm respectful, and I've been trying to be as respectful as I can, because frankly, I do respect anybody who wants to run for and do the work. But then there's also Joshua Smith, who was he was set on the Libertarian National Committee and was the vice chair for. He served half of served about half of it, and then he's running as well from Iowa. And then there is Michael Rechtenwald, who is a college professor who is from Pittsburgh, I believe.
Okay.
I can remember all of the people I'm running against, and they're all they're all nice guys. But I just, of the 6 of us, to be putting the libertarian message forward to a new audience, to bring in, millions of these disaffected voters. So many people are sick and damn tired of the Republicans and Democrats.
And this is a good question for Captain, and this is just kind of a pretty much a military-industrial complex question. Under what circumstances would a libertarian president declare war? I'm assuming it'd be pretty much whatever's laid out in the Constitution, but how do you, I mean, because there's some parts of the military-industrial complex, in my opinion, Chase, that need to be there. I mean, we need to have free trade, like what we do in the Middle East, what we do in the Southeast Asia, et cetera, is to keep the trade lanes open and keep world trade free. So some of that's necessary, but with any government program, as any good libertarian knows, there's bloat. I mean, there's so much bloat, and every state has a National Guard, every state has an Air National Guard, every state has it. So it's like, it's so much redundancy upon redundancy. I mean, they hold on to all these traditions, and we spend thousands and millions of dollars in the name of tradition for no reason. I mean, flybys at fucking sporting events is one of them. Each one of those planes, every time it flies by, is $35,000. I know they need some flying hours for the guys, but I mean, do we really need an area event?
Yeah, so first off, you're right. We do need to look at the Constitution. So under the War Powers Act, we do actually have the ability to respond if we're attacked directly, like immediately. Like, we don't have to wait for that. So if someone like lobs a RPG at one of our boats, we can lob some rounds right back at them. But short of that, any action we need to be taking needs to be formally declared by Congress and signed by the president to go to war. That's the way it's supposed to work. And the conditions that I would be looking for that declaration to be sent to me from Congress would be if we're directly attacked, our sovereignty is threatened. If someone attacks us, we immediately will respond with the full force and might of the U.S. military, and people will rue the day that they ever did that. I also believe this is, again, going back to the gun question. This is, take any country in the world. You can fill up any boat, any size, a cruise ship with their military if you want to, and park it off of the coast of Savannah. They will not get to Atlanta before the rednecks in the woods take them out with their rifles, because that's the kind of country we are. We are it would be like the movie Red Dawn for real. And so this is another reason why we need to have a well-armed population here at home, because it does prevent anybody from really thinking about invading us. And then we do, like, information warfare, things like that, like foreign governments who would seek to destroy our power grids and things like that. There's national security roles for that to be a way better investment to be investing in a few computer programmers than spending a couple $1 million on another tank or another plane that we don't. Reallocation of resources we can make that would keep our country safer, would be more in line with the constitutional use of the military, and also prepare us for the modern warfare that we're going to be experiencing if we do go to war. So there's so many ways we can improve the process and do it at a much lower price tag, and do it without constitutionally invading people's privacy via the national and keep that in line with our constitutional principles. I think all of that is totally doable. Again, if we actually elect people outside of the two-party system, because the military industrial complex, unfortunately, they don't serve the people in their districts. They serve Raytheon and Boeing and those kinds of folks out there. They don't really serve you and me and the average Joe who's just trying to live their life, raise their family, and get along in their community. Those days are long gone. Eisenhower warned us against that, and it's been almost 75 years since he's been president. So
still there, right? All right. So the first election I could have calculated voted in was 2004. Now the Libertarians and Ron Paul were making some noise around that time. I remember I was in college. It was like my last year or two at Kent. I was old when I went to college. I was like 28 when I graduated. But they used to, the Ron Paul boys, it was right where the internet was first really kicking off. Like Facebook just popped in 04. You still have MySpace and stuff. So there was whatever online, but Howard Dean did a little online stuff too. But the Ron Paul bros, as they would call them in the space, they were greatly pushing it. So it was hitting it there. Now, were you a John Kerry the guy that year? What were your thoughts personally going into that election in 04? Because we were at the height of the war there. I mean, we still had a lot of stuff. We still thought they had WMDs and shit like that. So what were you thinking personally going in that election as an 18-year-old?
Yeah, so I got started in politics being and because George Bush was a Republican and I didn't know about libertarians and others, I kind of just became a Democrat. And war being the number one issue on my mind, I thought Dennis Kucinich was the best choice because he was the most anti-war on the stage. He talked about, changing the name from the Department of Defense to the Department, he said, let's have a Department of Peace, right? So Kerry, because he was the not George Bush on my ballot. And I was frustrated. There were lots of things I didn't like about him. Particularly, he wasn't forceful enough against the war in Iraq. And then in 2008, we had this primary. It was Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama were really the main two. And Hillary Clinton was just like it was like a Democratic version of George Bush, right? I didn't want her because she was going to continue the war on terror policies. And Barack I'm going to close Gitmo and I'm going to stop the drone bombings and I'll end these wars. And, oh, we're going to talk to anybody we want without precondition. Well, I'll talk to the Ayatollah of Iran, he said. And then he walked back every single promise he made to the anti-war community. He abandoned us. I said, no more being a Democrat. They've abandoned the anti-war community. And it was a couple years later that I found the Libertarian Party and realized that they are the true pro-peace anti-war party. That those beliefs actually fall right into line with the greater principles of liberty and libertarianism. We don't have to excuse that away from the rest of our political positions. No, that's right in line with our philosophy. And so I found a great political home. Home up and support those who want to continue growing the Libertarian Party. And I want to do that as a presidential nominee. I want to help. One of my New Year's resolutions is to double our party membership this year as a presidential candidate, and then stay it over 4 years. So I guess it's like a 4 New Year's resolutions kind of a thing. But that's what I want to do because I sincerely believe we need to have an alternative.
And speaking of 4 years, it says, what's your, I actually don't know this myself. What is your, if you think about Libertarian Party being freedom, this is where it's kind of a double-edged sword, in my opinion. I'm kind of answering the question for myself, then I'll let you answer it. But I think, because if you think of the Libertarian Party as the ultimate freedom party, as long as you're not bothering anybody, do what you want. But, that does promote institutionalism. You don't want some guy in there for 30, 40, 50 years, and then he's sitting there, he can barely breathe, and he's deciding policy on, internet she has no idea even how to log into his fucking bank account with. So what's your take on term limits?
So, I can't speak for all libertarians on this one, but I can speak for myself. There's kind of two schools of thought about term. School of thought that the term limit is the limit set by the voters. If the voters like who's being there, they're going to keep sending them there, and that a voter should have a right to send whoever they want as long as they want. There are people who support age limits. Canada, for instance, they have an age limit on their Senate and their Supreme Court of 75 years. After 75 years, you can't run anymore. You're done. After that term is up. I actually believe in changing. This would require change. No easy task, but I would support term limits. I think I've always been one who says 4 for the House and 2 for the Senate. So that's 4 terms in the House gives you 8 years in power in the U.S. House of Representatives. Now, let's say you've done a great job in the House, right? You've served for 4 terms. You've done great for your community. And now you're saying, I want to bump up to Senate. Well, 2 Senate terms. 2 Senate terms is 12 years. Meaning if you start in the House and then go through 2 terms in the Senate, you will have been in power for 20 years. This is a good enough term as a legislator to have done your job, in both chambers. And so that's kind of always been where I've personally. One of the ways we can overcome the strife of the Supreme Court is if we did rotating 18-year terms for the Supreme Court. And then you would have 2 court terms every presidential term. So every president would get 2 Supreme Court justices. And it would just, and unless a quick death unless somebody dies, right? And if somebody dies, right, you have to fill the vacancy. But you would expect to get at least 2 every 4 years. I think that would help do away with the hyperpartisanship we're seeing at the courts. If I could just wave a magic wand and change the Constitution, those would be the term limits I would instill. But being that it does require such a major amount of political capital on, just because changing the Constitution is very, very hard, and it requires a lot of politicians to support it, and super supportive of, I'm afraid. So with that being said, I encourage voters to impose their own term limits on incumbents and get these old fogies the heck out of there. If they're 4 generations removed from you, they probably shouldn't be serving in office. If they're freezing in mid-sentence because their brain shorts out, like our Senate majority, he was the majority leader for a long time, Mitch McConnell. The the dude froze in mid-sentence. He just completely blanked out of existence there for a minute. That's really scary when you think. And really, when you think about it, is it them or is it their unelected staff who just really wants to cling to that power? Like, Dianne Feinstein's chief of staff and her staff were like, don't retire, Dianne. We don't want to be out of work. You've been in power forever. We really like the cushy office we have.
Right. Oh, yeah. Well, I think that's why they're pushing all these. I mean, the guys that are there now because they can control them. I mean, Trump's never going to admit this because he's a fucking egomaniac, but they get Trump in office. They pull all the things they want. The GOP are passable forever because the man just, I don't want to get too much into Trump because how people go off on tangents about that stuff. But if it's,
I actually think he's worse on the other side of the spectrum. He is so uncontrollable that he's like because he doesn't know what he's doing. And so he has people trying to wrangle him in, but it's the equivalent of trying to rope a really angry steer. Like, yeah, you can get the lasso around him, but are you going to hold on to him for long or are you going to get your ass dragged? And that's what happens to everybody who tries to hold him in or rein him in. He drags them every time. And this is why their party lost in 2022. And why, I mean, I'm no crystal ball, but I can tell you right now, and let me just couch this. I don't love Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis or any of them. They're all horrible. Same with the Democrats. I'm not a fan of any of them either. But if you want to tell me who's the easiest Republican for Joe Biden to beat, it's Donald Trump. And Republicans this lesson because they could probably nominate just about anybody who's in their party who's under the age of 60 and have a much easier time of it. But they're just determined to really try to put. And we'll see how that goes. We'll see how that plays out, and we'll see how many millions of votes, disaffected voters, will go to the Libertarians because Trump versus Biden 2.0. I mean, that puts a bad taste in everybody's mouth, right?
I hate thinking about it, bro.
Isn't it great that we'll have other options?
Oh, beautiful. All right, not to go back to the drug thing, but we ask the questions as they come in. This is what you do as a good politician. Do you think the government actually cares? This is actually pretty deep here. Do you think the government actually cares about the drug crisis, or do you think they treat it as more of a population control, like sending young men to war, that kind of thing?
So I don't think it's necessarily a population control thing, but I'll tell you, here's the truth. Government doesn't care. The government as it currently exists doesn't really care about any individual. So they don't care about individuals suffering from addiction. They don't care about these people because they care about who pays them, who is paying them, who's controlling them. It's not you and me. It's those very powerful, and many of those people who are perpetuating the drug crisis that we see. And so they don't care about that. This is why I'm a libertarian. This is why I want to take power out of the hands of government and give it back to each and every person. Because even as well-meaning as government is, absolute power corrupts absolutely. When you centralize power, it's easily corruptible. It's easy to get tainted and destroyed. This is why we have to decentralize power and give it back to each and every individual to make our lives, return prosperity back to us. Because frankly, if you make government big and powerful, that just attracts big and powerful interests to continue to control your life via the government. And if you return liberty back to, there's still going to be winners and losers. There will be rich people and there will be poor people. But what there won't be is super, super rich people using every mechanism of control and force that they can, because government is the monopoly of force. It's what makes them different. If it was just about control and you could have the equal control without government, corporations wouldn't buy our government. They would just let government be weak and ineffective and not do anything, which it really should be basically non. The way they control you is using that monopoly of force that government provides them. That's the tool that they use. That's why they find value in buying your congressman, buying your senators, buying your governor, buying your city councilman. I mean, if you want to look who's in control of Cop City earlier, well, why is Cop City being built even though a majority of the population doesn't want it? Well, because the Atlanta Police Foundation wants it. And who pays for them? Home Depot, Coca-Cola, Delta Airlines, very rich and very powerful corporate interests. And I recommend rejecting it at every level. Use the power of your voice and your vote to reject it, because ultimately that's something they can't take away from you, at least not yet.
All right, we got a question from Blake. We actually asked this to everybody, so this is a great time to ask you now. Out of the Beatles or Queen, who would you pick?
Shit, that is a really tough choice. Who do I listen to more often these days is probably Queen, just because I like that like full-throated studio sound that you get from. So I have to respect the Beatles. I'm going to say who is the more influential band? It's the Beatles, without a doubt. In fact, I would argue that probably members of Queen would say the Beatles got me into rock and roll, so I became a member of Queen. Like I don't believe that is outside the realm of possibility. And so greater musical impact. But who's playing more on my playlist regularly is right now Queen. And that's just because there's a few tracks that they're really upbeat. They get me going. Under Pressure is the ultimate like shower in the morning song because it gets you in and out of the shower real quick. And so like, because you're under pressure, man. And so I would say I enjoy Queen more, but they have the greater musical impact.
All right, a question from Captain. He's from the UK. I obviously mentioned that earlier, but I'll do like the give my take thing first. He says, "Is America systematically racist?" I mean, initially, yeah, there was some things of racism. I mean, the GI Bill was built specifically to exclude a lot of the black retooning soldiers, but I think over the years we have become a lot less racist. And anybody who thinks that we're the exact same racist nation we were in the '90s compared to now is just pulling the wool over their eyes. And I will say that I think social media and the media itself wants there to be a lot of racism. They want people to think there's racism because there's a lot of money in it. You got to be real. A lot of it's a grift. I personally think, there's never going to be utopia. There's always going to be differences. But I think, in my opinion, we're one of the least racist nations on earth. I mean, go to Japan. I don't want to throw Japan under the bus, but go to any of these countries where they haven't seen another type of person like them and see how they treat you. It's not like here.
So here's what I'll say. Do I believe the American? No. Do I believe there are government structures that exist and still exist today that are systemically racist? Absolutely. If you just look at the statistics, like take criminal justice, for instance, just the disparity in drug crime, the fact that if you are, while white folks and black folks use cannabis at about the same percentage rate, if you look at the arrest rates, who's getting arrested for using cannabis, you're 4 times more likely if you're black. That's a systemically racist statistic. Like wrong that the criminal justice system is doing. And then look at the sentencing disparities for things. Same crime, different skin, different sentencing. That is a systemically racist problem. And those need to be addressed. We do need to address those problems within particularly criminal justice. And there are other areas too. Is there racism in the world? Yes. But I think that exists anywhere in the world. There will be some measure of racism that exists. And you're never going to be able, as you said, live in a utopia that stamps it all out. But I will say, to your point earlier about Japan, and again, not throwing Japan under the bus, and also not showing too much love for Ronald Reagan. He was pretty terrible in a lot of his stuff. But he said, America is unique. I'm paraphrasing. You can go and live in France your entire life and never be a Frenchman. You can spend all of your life in the world of Japan and you will never become Japanese. Anywhere can come to this country and become an American. That is what makes America different. That is the unique quality of America that I actually think can help combat some of the systemic racism that we see. But again, it requires us to examine who is maintaining those power structures, who are the people who are buying our Congress, like the broad diversity of America. I'm just going to be realistic with you. And when we take power out of the hands of government and return it back to the broadly diverse population of America, we're going to see breaking down walls of oppression. And I believe in peaceful, nonviolent resistance as a means of political change. And I have a real world example of that in this country. Just look to the Jim Crow South. Look to people who are in their 70s now or older and ask them what they were doing in the 60s and 70s. They were marching against Jim Crow. They were using peaceful, passive, nonviolent resistance to tear down walls of authoritarianism and oppression. We can do the same thing in this country if we another and quit letting the government and the two mainstream political parties to continue to divide us and make us seem like we're hateful or we should hate or fear one another. No, we should distrust and be skeptical of them. those who are seeking to divide us. Quit playing into the game of political What we need is realism in the world, and we need to realistically address that we are being conditioned and controlled to hate one another by power structures in the government that profits off that hatred, and we need to stop it.
All right, now what prompted you initially to run for Congress? And was it the previous guy passing away and they just wanted to take a shot? Was there any lessons learned from that first campaign or that humbled you or that you would have done different in hindsight?
Well, it was an interesting campaign because, as you said, it was a special election. John Lewis passed away. And, with that, it was like a 9-week campaign. So it was like breakneck speed. So I learned how to get a campaign up and running. Lessons I had to learn from that campaign. But the reason why I ran is because, A, there was no ballot access signature requirement. So it was very easy for a libertarian to jump on the ballot. It's hard for us to run for Congress in most elections and here in Georgia. But also champion of the civil rights struggle that I just mentioned. And so I wanted to make sure that libertarians had a voice in those who were going to be replacing him to honor kind of that legacy of his career and also present those in Atlanta with a libertarian choice of their ballot, probably for the first time ever. I was really honored to do that. And yeah, the lesson I learned is get up and running really quickly, particularly when you only have 9 weeks to do it. And it was unique because it was during the height of COVID. So I couldn't like door knock. I tried door knocking and a lady sprayed me with Lysol. So I realized that's like not the way to do this. Tablings on running trails and at parks to try to get people's attention. So it was a unique campaign for sure.
All right. So what's your take on that, the way Georgia does the election with the 50% thing? Do you like that or is that just annoying and it's never going to leave?
Well, I think runoffs are better than plurality voting, certainly, because ultimately we do have a choice that has over half of the voters' choice there. But like I said, there's better ways to do that. You can make runoffs instant with ranked choice voting, and it would save us tens of millions of dollars from having a thing. In 2022, if you were a military or overseas voter in Georgia, you voted using a ranked choice ballot because there was too little time to get 2 ballots out to people. And so they just said, put your first choice on there and then put your second choice if there's a runoff. And so if it's okay for the GIs out there serving overseas who are from Georgia to be able to figure out, the taxpayer a lot of money. So runoffs are better than plurality voting, but instant runoffs are certainly better than waiting weeks to do it and spending tens of millions of dollars.
Agreed. Have you met Justin Amash, and how far do you think we are getting away from a libertarian who ran as a libertarian elected to national office?
So I met him briefly. I hope to see him at LibertyCon next weekend out there in DC. He'll be out there. I'll also be out there for a day as well. So I hope to bump into him and maybe get a little bit more FaceTime with him. But electing libertarians to state houses and to our Congress, I hope we can get that. Honestly, like best case scenario, like maybe we do it this election. But my real goal is to make sure that in 2028 we have on the board on the federal level. So whether it be I want to work for that in 2028. But like I said, that involves my goal of doubling our membership. So that way our 2028 slate of candidates starts with twice the volunteers, twice the donors, and twice those who are going to get out there and knock on doors, throw their votes. So it's all about building us up. That's the name of the game for this campaign. I want to be the brand officer for this party, bring so many new people in that we are just a force to be reckoned with for every election from 2024 and moving forward.
All right. Now, as many know on this show, we're getting to the weed, guys. We're getting to the weed. I'm a huge advocate of the weed. Thank God we just got in Ohio. I called it because back in 2015, we were voting on it. I was like, you guys got to vote on this, man. I know it's a shitty bill, but there's provisions we could change it. We're not going to get it for a while. And then sure enough, I was right, 8 years later, but we finally did it. I called it. We had a victory special that night, etc. But you yourself, no, it's a kind of, if we're being real, being a libertarian, I'm probably like you, more of a independent kind of thing. Libertarian, just a party that makes more sense. But the weed thing is the main calling card for libertarians for a lot, Do you yourself smoke weed? And if not, do you think if not, why? And do you think the federal government will ever get its head out of his ass when it comes to this issue? Because I don't think, honestly, in my personal opinion, with the two guys, Biden and Trump, I don't think they're ever going to do it just because Trump, the Republican thing. And I don't think Biden, I still think he thinks it's a gateway drug that ruined up his son's stuff. So what's your answers to all them questions I just read?
So totally legal sooner than later. Over half the country lives in a state with recreational cannabis. And I do believe that ball is rolling downhill. You're not going to be able to stop it. As you saw, even in a red state like Ohio, passed pretty overwhelmingly, right? They have medical cannabis in even Mississippi. So even like the most conservative states in the country, they even have medical cannabis. And so I don't think you're going to be. But as far as me personally, I've consumed cannabis in the past. I don't think it's a terrible drug. I think honestly, we need to demystify cannabis. I tell people all the time, we have wine culture with moms all the time. They have like, T-shirts and like little, plaques you hang on the wall. It's like, when the baby's asleep, time to uncork my fun or whatever. Like we have beer commercials, the Super Bowl, we have beer sponsors, NASCAR. Like, honestly, just demystify cannabis. It should be no more controversial than having a glass of wine at the end of the night. Don't get too effed up to like be able to function, right? Like that, but you shouldn't do that on alcohol or caffeine or really anything. You can overdose on energy drinks, for Christ's sake. And so for me, like, use it. I found particular value in it when I was struck by a car in 2019 while crossing the street. I ruptured 3 vertebrae in my neck and spine, and I found particularly cannabis to be far more management than the opiates that the doctor was trying to push on me. I also felt like because of the reduction in like addiction levels and the fact that really also helped me make that decision, because I didn't want to be taking something that could potentially lead to me having a dependency upon it. So I absolutely am a supporter of cannabis rights, not just medically, but for any recreational adult who wants to use it. But I just say, like anything, be responsible in your own behavior. Like, you shouldn't have to have a daddy government or a nanny state like telling you what to do. Your own personal responsibility. And if you can't do that, well, the chips will fall where they may, and you'll understand the consequences of your said action. Like, that's just the way it should be. And it's really where I am along with anything. And this is like when somebody asked me once, when I wanted to decriminalize all drugs, he goes, well, do you want to do heroin? I said, no. Do you want to do it? Go out and do it. You would still know that's probably a pretty bad decision to make for most people. So you probably avoid it. So I don't think you need the government to regulate your behavior. You can regulate it yourself. And in terms of cannabis, why is it being modified when, we're not doing that with wine or beer or anything else? Just, let people be people, let adults be adults.
All right. This is kind of a loaded question the way he asked it, but I kind of familiar with, I think, where he's getting at here. Basically, in California, the weed laws are to the point where it's kind of all underground-ish. Like, only people who are selling off the books are going to make money. I mean, it's so regulated. Like, California is regulated up the wazoo. And I'm not intimately familiar with how he's asking the question of, gangs doing that. But that sounds like something that could potentially go on. What is your take on that? I mean, is that just a good example of how California just overregulates things and they just need to back off a lot? What's your take on that?
Yeah. So first off, if there's a black market that's still operating in a cannabis legal state, that's we're regulating it and creating a profit margin to operate outside it. And this is why I support full decrim. Legalization is creating a framework that people didn't have to walk around and creates that black and gray market. But to more specifically your point, what do I think about MSN 13 or who or trafficking people for the purposes of growing pot in California? I think that's a crime. It's a crime of coercion and force, that people should be forced to commit slave labor. Like, that's obviously a violation of people's liberty. I can support that is a good idea or something we should support, just like I can support free immigration for people who want to come here and work and create a living, create a business, or do whatever they want to do. Goes right in that question. I can support all of those things and not support MS-13 trafficking people. And in fact, I think if we had what I would support, an Ellis Island style of immigration system, where if you just want to come here, just come here through a port of entry, declare yourself, so that way, if you're not wanted for extradition somewhere else, you should be able to just come here and work, right? And be peaceful. And I think if we could focus our law enforcement on those who would seek to traffic people by force. We could laser focus on those who are trying to not through ports of entry, because if you're going through a port of entry, well, you're obviously trying to be peaceful. And if you're at that point still trying to sneak across the border through other means, well, you're probably trafficking or doing something bad with people. To stop people from being exploited, and that includes human trafficking south of our border. So ultimately, don't focus on the 99.9% of peaceful work. Let's laser focus ourselves on the very small number of people who are being forced to, or who are forcing others to be trafficked over here. It's a smaller number of people, and there's only so many hours in the day for law enforcement. So let's focus on them and just let peaceful migrants be peaceful migrants. Let them work, let them contribute and build and start their own American dream. Same way my ancestors did. Did you know 40% of Americans can trace their ancestry back through Ellis Island? 40%.
I looked it up. It was 1905. My great grandfather came over from Bohemia. I saw
there
it.
You go.
Yeah. All right. What is have you met the wrestler Chase Oliver? I didn't know there was a wrestler near. I was looking up and I was like, oh wow. And have you ever been to, or are you into any kind of pro wrestling?
First answer, no. Second question, yeah, absolutely. I was raised a pro wrestling fan since I was a little kid. 4 years old when my family lived in Arlington near Dallas. I would go see shows. But yeah, I've been a fan of pro wrestling pretty much my whole life. I think action soap opera these days. I love it. But I'll tell you a quick wrestling story. So I was about 9 years old. So this would be maybe like actually more like 7 or 8. So it was like 1992, 1993 period. And I'm at a grocery store and I'm there with my little brother and my dad, and we see this giant man at the deli counter ordering meat. And I say to my little brother, hey, that guy looks like Big Van Vader. And Leon White, Big Van Vader, that's exactly who it was. He turned around and growled at me and my little brother, because I am Big Van Vader, and terrified me and my little brother. And we scream. My dad starts laughing. My dad thinks it's the funniest thing in the world. But that's like my first earliest pro wrestling memory, like that's seared into my brain. But I was at the Georgia Dome in 1998 when Goldberg beat Hollywood Hogan for the title. I was at WrestleMania 27 in Atlanta. So I'm going to be watching the Royal Rumble Saturday night.
Heck yeah, the white. I've had many wrestlers on the show. I'm like wrestling adjacent. I mean, I still like it, but man, there's a lot of commitment to being a wrestling fan because you get like 3 hours of Raw, 2 hours of SmackDown, and AEW every single night. I just don't have that kind of commitment and time at my advanced age to pick it up here. Real quick, we have a couple more questions and we'll get out of here. Question from Captain. How do you stop hyper-aggressive special interest groups from exerting undue political influence? It's a great question, actually. And I think that's what the essence of the Libertarian Party is about. Would you say too, Chase? Like, I mean, these, like, for example, we all harken back to the pharmaceutical stuff. 29% of advertisements are from pharmaceutical companies. Ask your doctor if this is right for you. We have no clue what these pills do until there's a fucking easy viral article. You know what I mean? So what's your take on this question right here? How do we stop this?
Well, I think a lot of the way we stop undue influence is we stop influence of government overall. If we break down the control and power of the federal government over each and every individual, that makes it these special interest groups to actually exert their influence and exert their force through the powers of government and levers of government. This is why we need to support libertarianism. This allows, instead of exchange happening through the centralized and force power of government, we can do this through a free exchange of ideas. I think when we have open discourse, free speech, free people to organize together, particularly against or a particular interest in a good way. I just think that's a better way for us to have exchange than for us to keep trying to buy influence of our government that's going to use force against us.
Heck yeah. All right. 2 more things and we'll roll. JV, I want to know your best wrestler of all time, in your opinion.
Best wrestler of all time? God, when I think quintessentially of a wrestler in my brain, it just always goes back to the Macho Man, Randy Savage, man. Like that guy, if you look up pro wrestler in a dictionary, that's who he is, with the charisma, the voice, the look, just the feel. That is a pro wrestler, like just in my brain.
I got a funny story about that. His brother, the genius Lanny Poffo, rest in peace. He passed away.
Lanny Poffo.
He was on the show. I had him on the show in 2020, and he was he was a weird cat, but he showed up to the interview. He didn't know it was gonna be video, and he was butt ass naked, bro. He's sitting there in bed.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories about Lanny Poffo from back in the day, but yeah, Randy Savage is like who I gotta say is like quintessential wrestler.
All right, let's say, if I want you to soft commit to something. If you get the nomination, I want to kick it with you at some point. We could travel to meet somewhere if you're campaigning, and we'll maybe share an edible or smoke something together. Can you soft commit to that if you win the nomination?
I can soft commit to that. I will be traveling all over the place, so I imagine I'll be back through Ohio at some point. So,
you still there?
Oh yeah, I am.
Oh, okay.
Sorry,
I thought it froze there. Yeah, your connection was a little choppy here and there, but we made it through. All right. Let's say you don't win the presidency. What are your moves for the next 5 to 10 years? You can stay in politics. You're going to be social media thing. What do you think you're going to do?
I'm definitely going to stay involved, helping to build our party up and strengthen ourselves for the elections to come. But I really thought about like what the employment. I might get back to the logistics industry, or I'll look for whatever opportunities jump in front of me. But politically speaking, I will still be active with the Libertarian Party and helping to build ourselves up.
All right, Captain says, I disagree with everything you said, but I respect you being here to say it. That's all what it's about. I mean, you don't have to agree on everything. At the end of the day, we got to better the country, man. We do. And do you got anything else to promote before you get out of here? And how do people get a hold of you?
Yeah.
Talk about your vitals and all that stuff. And if somebody could drop his campaign link in the chat, please do.
Yeah, so you can go to votechaseoliver.com. That is my website. And at Chase for Liberty on all the major platforms. That's Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. We're kind of all there, as well as YouTube. So check us out there. And if you want to check out the Free and Equal debates, if you go to freeandequal.org, you can cast a vote for me and 5 others to be in the Free and Equal debate. I think that ends soon. So check it out and jump up in there and support me and others to be involved in a debate. So chaseoliver.com, at Chase freeandequal.org.
All right, Mr. Oliver. Chase, my brother, appreciate mad love. Look forward to talking around the trail and picking your brain about random things around the trail, buddy. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, man. All right, we'll talk to you guys later. Peace. And